Hey, welcome back. You should be on the Ms. Barlev chemistry review. Fill in the blank notes. This is video number 2, so make sure you have seen the first 15 minutes of the screencast. We have just covered atoms and ions and isotopes and elements and all that great stuff, and now we're going to move into compounds. So these are different combinations of elements. We're going to be talking about a couple of specific ones that are really important to living things. The first one is water. All right, when everyone says it's really important to stay hydrated, they're not kidding, okay? Water makes up 90 to 95% of plant cells, so anything that does photosynthesis, including our giant kelp in the ocean, and 70 to 80% of animal cells, so that includes us and any other organism. All right, it's really important for not only different processes that occur in cells, so if you're taking a look at the picture here, lots of different processes, including how to get energy, including how to transport things in and out, but also just for your general well-being. All right, water is H2O, so 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. We do already have a slide on that, so I'm going to flip back real fast, but this is our covalently bonded water molecule. All right, there is 1 sharing of electrons here, so a single bond, and another sharing of electrons here, another single bond. Always helpful to remember that water looks like Mickey Mouse. Now, this isn't a compound, but it is an element and is super important to all living things. And this one is carbon. All right, you may have heard in different sci-fi movies that we are carbon-based life forms. And that is true because living things need carbon. They also need a series of other elements that make us organic. Okay, and organic meaning living organisms. All right, these are carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. All right, so if you didn't know what those elements were just by their symbol, you might want to write those down, find a periodic table, make sure you can recognize those. Okay, it's going to be very important. Carbon has 4 valence electrons. This is an important characteristic. Okay, 4 valence electrons. That means it needs to either lose 4 electrons or gain 4 electrons to be stable. This is talking about like our ionic features, all right? It's unique because carbon can bond to 4 other things, all right? 4 other things, that's a lot, okay? So we're going to keep that in mind as we talk about how important carbon is and as we move into our macromolecules, all right? And real quickly, I did brush over this, I apologize. But water we're going to talk about more tomorrow. All right, we're going to talk about water more tomorrow as we talk about the properties of water and then salinity and how that affects our marine organisms. So moving into macromolecules, these are important and you probably know what they are but just don't realize it yet. Okay, macromolecules are really large molecules in living cells that are made up of many, many little pieces. All right, these pieces are called monomers. All right, if you think of like mono as one, all right, that's the prefix mono. Okay, that's like the small piece or one piece. So if you're looking at my puzzle picture, that would be one of these. And then a polymer, so poly like many, all right, is all of them together. So this would be all of my puzzle pieces. Okay, so when we go in and talk about these 4 macromolecules, we're going to talk about the monomers and the polymers. We're going to talk about some other characteristics of them. Now, if you'll notice in your fill in the blank notes, you do not have fill in the blank notes for them. You should have a separate chart, okay? It looks kind of like this one here, okay? So you should be using this chart to fill in the information on macromolecules, okay? So make sure you have that. Now, going back. So there are 4 macromolecules: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Now, most of those you probably are familiar with because they are dietary needs. Right? You have to have carbs and you eat your proteins, and lipids are actually fats. So these are all things that we find in our food sources, and that is why the saying, you are what you eat, is truly correct. Okay? So I'm going to dive into what these are specifically. Please note, I am not talking about dietary supplements, dietary needs, high protein diets, low fat diets, carb diets, anything like that, right? This is a marine bio course. The first one I'm going to talk about is carbohydrates. All right, carbohydrates are sugars. So if you're taking a look here, our monomer, the name of that is going to be a monosaccharide. I think it's kind of helpful having that to remember because mono for monomer and monosaccharide both have that prefix. So yeah, mono both in monomer and monosaccharide. Some examples of our monosaccharides include glucose and fructose. You might start recognizing these names because anything that ends in ose is a carbohydrate. So if you recognize that ose ending, you're talking about a carb. A polymer is a polysaccharide. Again, super easy to remember. So make sure you know these prefixes and root words and suffixes pretty well. Okay? Now you can test for the presence of a carbohydrate in any substance, and there are two possible tests, an iodine test and a Benedict's test. I'm hoping to be able to do a lab with you guys where we can test for the presence of these macromolecules in different things. Carbohydrates are made of three types of atom: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So these are the three elements present. If you take a look at this picture over here to your right, this is the structure I would like you guys to draw on your chart. And at the top of your chart, there should be a color coding key. So make sure you're color coding and understanding what these colors mean. Now, carbs are important for many different reasons. They provide energy, and specifically quick energy. So they are a quick energy source. If you've ever noticed, if you have something super sugary, maybe candy or fruit or something like that, you'll get a sugar rush. That's because your carbohydrates are your quick food energy source. All right. They also are important for structural support on cell membranes and many other cell features. Some examples include cellulose. So this is our plant-based or vegetable-based, right? Sugar. Honey is a very high sugar content. Anything that you've ever seen that ends in ose, so this could be something you've seen on food packaging or nutrition facts. And then milk is here, even though it's high in protein, because it has something called lactose, all right? And lactose is something many people actually can't digest. So if you're lactose intolerant, you cannot process that sugar. Now we're going to talk about proteins. All right, proteins are our meats, our nuts, our butters, our stuff like that you've eaten. Okay, they're made up of something called an amino acid. All right, and all these amino acids, like the one in the far right, so this is the structure you should be drawing, the one on the top right, they come together to form your protein. You can test for protein using something called Biuret's solution. You don't need to worry about what that means quite yet. Proteins are a little bit more complex than our carbohydrates. So if you're looking at that funky picture on the far right, this is hemoglobin. This is what helps oxygen flow through blood. All right, as all these different complex folds and combinations of elements, which is why you see more than there were in carbs. So we have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Proteins are really important for the body. They have a lot of different features on them. For instance, structural support. All right, movement. So protein, this is why you need it for your muscles because it's involved in those processes. Immune defense. So in our immune system, they use proteins to help us fight off pathogens. You can speed up reactions using a type of protein called an enzyme, right? So enzymes are important for speeding up any type of a chemical reaction. They're also made up of hormones. So hormones are proteins, all right? And I included a cute polar bear picture because hair molecules or keratin are made of proteins. So your hair is made of proteins, fingernails, anything like that is a type of protein. Also organisms that have a shell, usually made of chitin, all right? So shells are protein as well. Moving on, we're now going to talk about lipids, and these are our fats. Common misconception that fats are bad for you. Obviously, too many fats are bad for you, but your body needs them. They're a very important feature. Now, lipids are special. They have two monomers. A monomer would be a glycerol with a fatty acid for a lipid. Well, that over highlighted. Pardon me. There we go. So a glycerol and a fatty acid. So if you're taking a look at the picture to the right, we have a glycerol, which is this backbone or the horizontal ones. All right. And then we have 3 fatty acids stemming from it. Okay. That's a monomer. the polymer would be known as a lipid. And in this instance, it's triglyceride in the pictures. That's the name of the polymer. You can test for a lipid using a paper bag test. You've probably seen this before. If you've brought in a fatty lunch or something that's a little greasy, the paper bag is stained and you can see the grease mark. That's literally how scientists can test for lipids. So you have been a scientist probably once in your life before. Lipids are only made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay, but they have really important functions even though they're a little bit more simple. For instance, energy storage. All right, so this is our long-term energy and energy storage. This is why some people may store fat in their bodies if they eat more than they need to for a daily energy consumption. They are also important for cell membrane structure, hormones, and vitamins. Now, the last macromolecule we're going to talk about is the nucleic acid. All right, the nucleic acid you probably haven't heard of maybe before, but you should have a general idea of what this is. All right, and it's because it's our DNA. All right, so if you don't recognize this shape in the top right, that is DNA. It's a double helix. We'll dive more into that when we talk about genetics and DNA and how it kind of functions. All right, it's monomers and nucleotides, so it sounds very similar to nucleic acid, which should help you remember. And many nucleotides strung together will make a nucleic acid. Now, you can't really test for, oh goodness, sorry, I'm really bad with the highlighting clearly. Now, you can't really test for a nucleic acid, but if something is alive and has DNA, you know it will have nucleic acids inside of it, okay? Now, DNA is super complicated, as you've probably heard. We're finally understanding it more so now, and as you can see, it has a lot of different types of elements, and that's for its complexity, okay? So we have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus, okay? Now, this picture in the center is one nucleotide. When they're strung together, they'll form this double or single helix here. So nucleic acids are really important because they have our genetic information. They also are involved in protein synthesis, which is this RNA molecule over here. We'll talk about that in depth in the upcoming chapters. So for right now, just know nucleic acids are responsible for our genetic information and they help us make proteins. So that's it for our chemistry review. Now you guys should be using your notes to complete the NEO quiz assignment. It's called the CFU, or Check for Understanding Chemistry Review. Okay, it's on NEO. You can take it as many times as you would like, so please try to get a perfect score. It's good practice. All right, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me. All right, thank you for joining in.